with that first part of the segment without me. We are back, and joining us right now. Is he joining us right now?
He is. Brendan's ready to go.
Kings insider for Sactown Sports, Brenden Nunes. Good morning, Brenden.
Morning. What's up, fellas? How we doing?
Oh, boy.
Fantastic, Brendan. 3-game win streak. Who knew? It's possible for this squad.
Absolutely. You know, when you do the same thing and take care of the details, possession after possession, and I'll spare you the 24 more. I would say Mike Brown probably pretty happy with how they played defense last night. Winning a game where you're shooting under 30% from three is, I think, kind of points towards them taking care of those details like he wants.
Brenden, I'm not saying they're the best defenders on the team because they aren't. But would I be way off base? And I'll, as always, push back. You won't offend me. Would I be off base if I said that perhaps the two biggest defensive success stories are Malik Monk and Kevin Huerter?
I wouldn't blame you. I see where you're going with that. I think that they've been really active in passing lanes and getting deflections, even being willing. It's kind of something that Mike Brown's asked for a while. There's a lot of times where it ends up that, one of those two, it really could be anybody, but one of those two ends up being the low man and the kind of last line of help defense, and standing in there and being willing to take a charge is something they've asked those guys to be able to do. And that and deflections, I think it has been embraced. Kevin is also rebounding the ball better. I thought throughout the course of this year, you could say the same thing for Malik. So definitely progress there, but I still think for what it's worth, Keegan Murray and De'Aaron Fox are carrying a lot of the work here.
For sure.
Yeah, as we're talking with Brenden Nunes, Sactown Sports Kings insider. Brenden, the value of the win last night. Look, they've played better than they did last night. There's better wins overall, maybe the Houston game or a couple of Phoenix, Minnesota, pick all those apart. But just beating New Orleans, and I don't know that it mattered that they didn't have Zion and Alvarado and Ingram, but the team that really tortured them all of last year, and a lot of these are the same guys that are back. It's just one, but what do you think the value of getting that victory was for this specific group?
Yeah, really, it was a 5-20 team, and you mentioned their injuries. They had some of their guys back, so maybe that record's a little misleading, but you got to take care of business against these teams that are right around you in this standings, in this, crowded Western Conference. They've already lost to the Spurs twice. You've lost to the Trailblazers, and they're 3-0 against the Jazz, but these are the teams that are supposed to be kind of clearly at the bottom of the West, and the Pelicans have kind of emerged to be in that group, at least up to this point. And Malik Monk said at a recent practice, like, he thinks that, they're not, they kind of have to prove to themselves that they can beat good teams and do that a couple times in a row. But in the end, it's just as important and counts the same taking care of business against the struggling teams. So you need everything that you can get. I think, obviously 0-6 against this team last year, and that probably has to do with the length a little bit. And like I mentioned earlier, I think embracing your defense specifically in this one is kind of just leaning into everything that Mike Brown was trying to get off his chest after that Utah game.
Brenden, when you look at the New Orleans game, I'm going to count that. So they're already 1-0. You got Denver. You got that home back-to-back with the Lakers. Then you have Indiana, Detroit, Lakers again on the road, Dallas and Philadelphia. Now, I understand, and Jason made a great point. Even though the Lakers and Denver, for example, don't have great records, it's still a brand name. There's still teams that worry you a little bit. But if I were to say Denver, Lakers 3 times, so that's 4 games, Indiana, Detroit, that's 6 games, and then let's add in Dallas and Philadelphia, so that's 8 games. What do you need to see the Kings win over the next 8 games to consider it a successful run?
Oh, yeah. All right. Well, I think that you want to win 2 of these Lakers games, obviously, 2 of the 3. I would definitely say the Philadelphia game, they've been struggling, even though Joel kind of coming back a little bit here. Indiana might be the easiest game on the schedule through all of that, with how they've struggled. And I think that Detroit's been a little better this year. I'd say maybe 5 wins, 5-3, throughout this stretch. I think, again, it's, to Mike Brown's point, it's taking care of all the details. It's not getting bored of playing the right way. And they had averaged 127 over the last 5 games going into New Orleans, but now that's 3 straight games where you held the most that you gave up was 113, 109 against New Orleans, 97 against Utah. And I think that's where they can find some consistency here, is improving on the defensive end. And because shots just aren't going to go in every single night. Kevin Huerter had his moments. It looks like Keegan Murray is bouncing back from a slow shooting start, but finding consistency on the defensive side of the floor, I think, is where you can accomplish that. And this is a lighter part of the schedule, and you really do have to take advantage of it. So I'd say probably, in my mind, realistically hoping for 5-3 here. Where are you guys at?
Yeah, I think 5-3 would be the floor for me, with all those games being a lot of those at home. And you've kind of done the work to get back to 500. So if you can get 5-3 or better, now you're working above 500 and see if you can chip away more. And, we were talking about this part to kind of tie into that, Brenden, about what to expect next. That I think it was a couple days ago, Dave and I were talking about the Athletic had their early report cards on the team, and the Kings got a D, and I don't think that was incredibly unfair. I mean, they've underperformed. But in there, they talked about their offensive rating currently being 6th or 7th, defensive rating 13th. And when those are paired together, that should be a better team than their record is. So I looked at that as a sign of what they still could become. Like, if they stay in a top 10 offense, in a top 15 defense, I don't know how they won't end up with a good record.
Yeah, I could see it. I think I'm with Malik Monk's point, though, that they need to beat some good teams. Because if you go back and think about this season, what are the great wins? I would say probably Phoenix, Houston would qualify there probably. And then it gets a little shaky from there. 3 of your 13 wins are against the Utah Jazz. So I think that I just need to see them string that together a little bit more against higher level competition. I thought they were fairly competitive against OKC until that 4th quarter. That's a big caveat at the end there, but I think that, this stretch isn't necessarily an opportunity to do it. And like I said earlier, the wins all count the same, but I'd be curious to see, are they going to get their annual beating in Boston this year, or are they going to be competitive in that one, So I think that there have been some encouraging signs for sure. And the numbers, I'm a little unsure on, because I feel like there's just been so much variance game to game drastically with some of these numbers. The 142 games of 140 in a row against San Antonio and Utah, for example. And then you have the 111 that they winning a defensive game all of a sudden in New Orleans, or the game going back to the game against San Antonio where they couldn't defend the pick and roll for the life of them, it seemed like. So there's just so much variance right now game to game, but I do think that those numbers show there's the blueprint of a solid team here that is definitely better than their 500 record.
Well, because you look at the net ratings, you say a lot of the stuff you threw out there, that this is not a if we were doing like the blind taste test here for the teams, where you look at all their analytics and then say, guess the record. The Kings record is probably about 4 to 6 games less than where they should be right now. I've been saying, and I even said in the last segment, it's a broken record. If the Kings could shoot a league average, which they did last year from beyond the arc, they probably have 4 or 5 wins more than they do right now. Here's the problem. I don't know, and I asked Katie the same question. I don't know how Mike Brown and the rest of the coaching staff, or Monty McNair or whoever, I don't know how you coach a team to make their threes. Like, hey, guys, you got to make your threes. Yeah, duh, dude, we know. So I don't know how you coach for it or against it. I don't know how they don't need to scheme for it, because they are at the top of the league or near the top of the league in open threes. So I don't know how you legislate against that when you say, well, what's the problem with the Kings? 90% of it is they need to make their threes.
Yeah, I would say I think Mike Brown's response is that, like he pointed in pregame before the Utah game, that to the Houston Rockets and the Orlando Magic, 2 teams that are shooting worse from 3 than the Kings are, but more successful. And trust me, I know how crazy it sounds, because the Kings just do not have the defensive talent, obviously, that Houston and Orlando have, and that's how those teams are still winning those games. But to him, that's where they can improve. That's where they can be more consistent. And I don't think, you mentioned what are they, 16th or something like that, or defensive rating currently. Like, I think that's a fine place to float. Like, we're just talking top 15, but you can't have those games against, you had back-to-back games against Portland and San Antonio. I want to say Portland had about 64 points in the paint, and then San Antonio, Chris Paul and Wemby just picked you apart in the pick and roll. So I think that's where they would look to find more consistency. But with the three-point shooting, the only thing I can even think of to try to make some of it simpler for Keegan, Kevin, some of these other guys is what we've seen them do a little bit recently. Like, you see Domas's assists go down because of it, but it's more pick and roll rather than DHO. If you're getting more standstill threes rather than, making it more difficult than it may need to be coming off movement and things like that. But also that's what these guys have done since they've been in Sacramento. And I think that they've proven that they're able to knock that down. So there's only so much you can do there. And I think because of that fact, Mike Brown would say, then, all right, we got to be better defensively.
Yeah, Brenden, one last thing for me on the bench. It hasn't been great, and that's fine. I think their starters are so overwhelmingly strong right now. But do you think, and maybe I'm just asking this knowing the answer here, I don't think we've seen in the years that Mike Brown's been here that he ever really gets a consistent bench rotation. And I think Herter's going to be playing and likely Ellis, but the rest of the group kind of shuffles around. Is that keeping them from getting consistent production, or is it just going to be so top heavy with a pretty spectacular starting five that the bench may not have as much of a factor anyway?
Yeah, I'm a little back and forth. I asked him about the backup center position at a recent practice, and he said that they're going to keep doing it by committee, and until someone consistently proves that they earn that spot, that's how they're going to do it. And a lot of comments like, well, how can they consistently earn it if they don't consistently get the opportunity? And I'm a little back and forth. I see both sides. Like, this is how Keon Ellis became, I guess you'd say, discovered last season. It's that other guys aren't cutting it. And I think Mike Brown is very big on holding guys accountable. And so you only have so long of a leash with some of these bench guys. And then you want to see what else you got. He was complimentary of how Kobe Jones did on Lauri Markkanen. I thought that was solid. I think I'm a little unsure about Kobe Jones' production on a game-to-game basis, but I see where he's coming from. And I think more than anything, like, Kevin Herter is locked into that. I think Keon Ellis is obviously right there, and then we'll see where Trey Lyles may fall into things as he eventually returns here. But I kind of get it. I don't think that they have the greatest talent on the bench, obviously. It's pretty telling, like, they signed Jay Crowder and then he's starting right after, So I think a lot of it is, in my mind, understandable, because I don't feel like they have the greatest bench talent. Like Isaac Jones, I understand why everybody loves Isaac Jones. I love Isaac Jones. He's a great story, and he plays his butt off out there, but he still makes a lot of mistakes, and how much can you live with that before you have to, sort of pull a little bit of a short leash there.
Brenden Nunes, Sacramento Kings insider, joining us each week as we lay it out, and the good and the bad and the ugly. Kings win, the Kings win. Brenden, appreciate you. We'll talk to you next week, brother. Have a good weekend.
Thank you. Enjoy your candy, Dave.
Thank you, Brenden. We'll take a quick 30-second break. When we come back,